Okay, I'm going to be putting together a little bit of a request here. I've got a colleague who is looking at doing some vertex painting inside of Unreal and trying to get an effect that is a little bit more complex. So this is, I'm going to Google the image here to show you what kind of effect we're going to attempt to get. Um, and that is a plaster that is on a brick wall that has been chipped away. So I'm just gonna go Google this here. So plaster, broken brick wall, and go to images here, and it's essentially this kind of thing here, where there is plaster, there is an underlying construction to the wall, and then most importantly, there's this transition period here where you're getting a very hard line on the plaster, but then you can see some of the underlying plaster underneath with the brick wall then inside that. And so I'm going to show you kind of how I approach doing vertex painting to try and achieve this kind of look. I'm inside of Unreal here, and the first thing that I want to do is I've already gone and imported this, but I'm going to show you what I made and imported into the scene, which is a plane. Let me try this again here. I'm just using snaps to snap this to the grid. And I went and gave this, instead of 4, 10 subdivisions. So there are enough vertices here to vertex paint. So this is kind of the first rule of vertex painting, is that when you do vertex painting, you are painting vertices. And without enough of them there, you're not going to get a very nice clean paint job. So that's kind of step number one. So I've gone and exported this, and I've imported it here inside of Unreal, which is this little mesh here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and rise this up a little bit above the ground so that we can see it. Okay, the next thing that I need to do is to prepare my materials. So I've got some textures here. I've got the brick wall texture that I did from the wall that was built earlier, somewhere over here, this guy here. So this is not a great brick texture. It's very stylized, but it'll do for what we're doing. And I've got some other textures that I've imported here as well. I've got a wooden floor, and this is the one that I'm actually going to use. So there's something missing from the brick wall that's really important to making this look really, really good, and that's the height map. So here, my wooden floor texture, I have the height map that has been exported. And so this gives me all the kind of variation and details that are inside of that. So you absolutely need a height map. You'll see here that with my brick wall, I do not have the height map. Now, I still have the substance that was used to generate this. And so I could go and get that for myself, but I'm not going to worry about that. We're going to work on a very basic kind of look to this thing here. So step number one is, excuse me, to make the material. So I'm going to call this VP for Vertex Paint and Material. And what I'm going to do, pop open this material, and let's start really, 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 really simple in terms of what this material is, okay? So to start off really simple, I'm just going to create 2 colors, and we'll vert paint between the 2 colors. So color 1 will make red, color 2 will make green. And that should give us now, and I'm going to use a linear interpolation to pick and choose which of these 2 colors is going to be visible. Now at 0.5, we should be seeing yellow here up here on the sphere, as we're going to be getting half of the red and half of the green up here, which, lo and behold, yellow. So the next thing we want to do is our vertex color. So I'm going to go grab the vertex color, and we'll just use the red channel for this for now. And I'm going to plug that into the lerp, and just like that, we have the simplest version of vertex painting. So what this is going to do is, you'll see now that we're only seeing green, and if I go to our material here, and I'm going to actually create an instance of this material, so that once we create some parameters, we can edit them on the fly. And I'll just grab this guy and throw it onto our plane, and I'll go to the vertex painting option here. And we're only going to paint inside the red channel, so I'm going to make sure that that's the only thing that's on. We're going to go in and let's paint at a value of 1, and we're going to paint in black here. so you can see what's going on. The vertex colors of this plane are already white. So you can see exactly what happens here as I paint. Vertices become black, and as they become black, we get a very small transition period of kind of yellow, and then we end into the green. Now, if you look at where that transition period is coming from, it's in between the two vertices. So this vertex is black, this vertex is white, and the transition that we get, the only place it's yellow, is right in the middle. And the transition we get is right there. Now, this is kind of a problem because if you're looking to get anything really sharp in terms of a transition, this is no good. It's not really giving you any kind of sharpness here. So what you would get if you were painting your materials is, you know, your texture on one side and the other texture here, and they would fade out into each other, which is not going to be ideal. Now I'm just going to paint this whole thing in black here, and you'll see that as I do this, as the vertices become painted, we can very clearly see the topology of the plane. And this is another problem with vertex painting that we want to avoid. Now, one of the ways you can avoid this is by ramping up the number of vertices you have on your plane, but obviously there's a trade-off here where it becomes stupid expensive, and you can't use that. So we're going to create something here that is going to lessen our need for this kind of topology. So what I've done inside of Photoshop here is I've created this little this noise. And the way that I did that, you can see I've got my history open here. All I did was I went and filled in clouds, and I did clouds on each individual channel. So the red channel's got clouds, the green channel's got clouds, and the blue channel's got clouds. Now, most important is that when you go look at these layers here, the way that the cloud filter works, and again, I'm doing this by going filters, render, and clouds. Now, the way that the clouds work is they are randomly choosing a value between 0 and 1, or in this case, in Photoshop, 0 and 255, for every single pixel that exists. This means that if we look hard enough, like over here, we shall probably find a pixel that is white. I'm at 224, not quite there. 226, somewhere in here. We might be able to find something that is 255. And conversely, we probably would also be able to find in the darkest recesses of this thing pixels that are black. In fact, we'll have an easier time doing this here, I presume. Let's go see. So right there is the 0 in that value. And if I zoom out here, cancel, and we'll zoom out, and I go over to this area, that looks like the brightest spot to me here. And again, if I go an eyedropper in here, you can see there, 255. So this green channel here does actually have all of the black and white values. And so we're getting kind of this random pattern here. Now, in order to make what I'm about to make work, we can't have black and we can't have white. So after I've gone and done these render clouds, the next thing that I did is I went into the levels. And in the levels, I just adjusted it so that we were getting, instead of black to white, dark gray to light gray. And I did this on each of the channels here, making sure that the contrast that was there got lessened somewhat. So we're not getting white pixels, we're not getting black pixels, but we still get this kind of noise. So that's crazy important. Now what I've done is I've gone and imported that, and here it is here, inside of Unreal. Now, typically I will have 3 or 4 of these things that I use consistently. I use these things a lot when I'm texturing things because they're a really good way of adding some variation and some randomization to some of the textures and materials that I want to make. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use that noise to break up the Vertex paint that we're getting here, so that when I paint a stripe right down the middle of this thing, you don't just see the topology, which is bad. We want to see some breakup in this. So I'm going to go into my material, and let's go and actually drag our noise into the material. So I'm going to go and bring this over here. I'm going to take our vertex color, and we're going to bring it back here too. And let's start adding a little bit of variation to our effect. So step number 1, let's multiply the red channel by the red channel. Okay, so I'm only going to be painting vertex color to begin with in the red channel. So I'll add some noise to the red channel. So by multiplying this, and if we go look at what this is going to give us, let's go plug this in here. I can't preview this in the material editor as there are no vertex colors here. So we're just going to see a flat value if I do that. So we'll move our red and green and our lerp out of the way for the time being. And make sure that I save this material. And we'll go take a look at what this is doing now. So once this updates, we should see the new effect here. So what you can see now is as I paint this, I don't get fully white anymore, no matter how much I paint it. And when I go black, it does completely paint in black. Now that's because I'm using a multiply, right? And the way the multiply works is it's going to add darkness to some of the values. Darkness is good because it's going to break up that white color and give us something a little bit more kind of chunky and noisy here. So it's using that noise image to really add some kind of depth to this. Now, the fact that I can't paint it white is a problem because, again, just like we were looking at before, if I were to do it like this, what you're going to end up with is a kind of translucency between these materials. So we're off to a good start, but we're not there yet. So let's also duplicate this image and let's multiply again the red channel. I'll use the green channel since they are different versions of the noise. And what I want to do is I want to make it so that I can get all the way to black when I paint, or all the way to white when I paint. So I can get all the way to black, can't get all the way to white. So to try and get all the way to white, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever my vertex color is, and I'm going to invert it. So this is going to be a 1 minus, and I'll plug this in here. And now, if we just swap this out, we should have the inverse problem. So I'll save this material. And what we should have now is when I paint white, it should go all the way white, but it won't go all the way black. So let's go take a look. And there, I can get all the way black by painting white, but painting black, I can't get all the way white. So we've just inverted the problem here. So that's cool. We've got two inverted problems, which means if we were to go and add them together, this should nullify the problem altogether, or close to it. So let's go take a look now at what this material does. Again, I'm going to save this out. Whoops, I probably should. Make sure that we're outputting this. Okay. So I'm going to save this again. And let's go take a look at what this does now. Now that we're adding one noise with the inverted version of the other noise, what we're getting now is kind of a combination of those two things. So you can see when I paint, we've lost all of the white and all of the black. So now just painting changes which version of the noise we're seeing. Now you notice when you're using noise like this, we can't see the vertices anymore. When I paint this all the way through, because we're just blending noise with noise, we lose any of the ability to see where that stroke was, which is really good. So how do we get all of those colors back, the flattening of this color? Well, that's easy. We're just going to take this out and add it to our original vertex color. Now, whenever you're adding, you want to make sure that you clamp as well, just to make sure you don't get up and above 1. And we don't want to go below 0 here either. So I'm going to put this here. We'll give this guy save. You can see the sphere's gone completely white now. Again, excuse me, there is no vertex color on this object, so that won't change anything here. So now what we're getting, if I go and paint in here, you can see that we get white. I can go all the way white. And if I go to black, again, we're still getting that noise from the black channel. So we need to be able to remove this. And the way that we're going to remove this is by taking our answer that we have, this this value that is noise, and we're going to use a power to ramp it up. Okay, so let's go take a look at what that does. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go in here, and after our add, I'm going to pull this away. I'm going to pull this out, and let's create a power. And what a power does is just going to multiply the answer of this thing by itself. And so we just need a high enough exponent here. I'm going to create a scalar that we can use as our exponent. I just want a value that's high enough that we end up getting all the way back to our base color. So let's try 50 to begin with. And we'll see how well that does. So I'll save this. And let's see if we can get all the way black and all the way white now. So now that's been saved. We'll let it update. So here, when I paint in black, we get 100% black. If I paint in white, we get 100% white. Now, if we zoom in and take a look at what's happening with the stroke, again, I can clearly see where my stroke is hitting these vertices, but the noise map is starting to break it up a little bit on that area. Now, my assumption here is that if we were to go into the instance version of this material, and I'm going to pull this off so we can see it as I edit it, my assumption is that we just have the exponent set too high. Now, the way that this exponent works is the exponent, let me zoom in without painting, the exponent is what's responsible for the contrast of this image. So the higher this exponent goes, the more times we're multiplying this image against itself, and the harder an edge we're going to get on this line. So for instance, if I go from 50 to 150, that sharpens that up. And 255 would be even sharper. So what we're going to get now, you'll see, is now a jagged line that's pretty sharp. If I bring this back down to 20, even below where the 50 was, you can see that we're starting to get a little bit more chaos in the paint job here. Now I'm still painting at a value of 1, which means we're still kind of seeing exactly where those vertices are. But if I bring this down, let's go paint at a value of 0.1. Let's switch this over to white. You can see that I can actually paint in cloudiness here, where it's not really paying too much attention. I'm going to go and pull this value down some more. You can see I can add some noise to this, where it doesn't exactly follow the vertice pattern. And again, this will work in both directions here. So there. We now have something a little bit more interesting in terms of the vertex color. So I'm able to now go and play with how sharp or how loose I want that area to be. So that's kind of cool. There's one more thing we should test, and that's what's going to happen if we set our exponent to 0. Now this is problematic. Multiplying an object by itself 0 times, an exponent of 0, you can see is not going to give us the ability to do anything with this. It's just going to fill it in white. So that means no matter what we do, we shouldn't let this exponent hit 0. So we're going to want to ramp that thing up a little bit. Now, here's where this gets a little bit more interesting. Let's close this. So we have this exponent here that we know a value of something like 0.1 is a very soft blending between these two colors, right? If we go and put this back in here, instead of just the black and white now, we'll see our red and green. So something in the exponent value that's pretty low, like 0.1 or even 0.01, is going to give us a very soft transition. So if I just go and save this now, we should be seeing a lot of yellow in this image. Depending on what I've painted. Okay, it's all there. Let's go and bring this up a little bit. I'm not sure what color the vertices are here. Looks like that value might be... Oh, you know what I've done? The instance is still set to 0. So let's just set the exponent to 1 for now. Or did I pull the exponent off? Yeah, I pulled the exponent off. So here's what we're going to do. So there, now you can actually see it. So a very, very low value in that instance of 1 or 0.1 is going to give us a very soft gradient in the transition between these materials. So you should see here, if I paint in black, let's paint this all the way in black here, that is really, 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 really hard to get that value to ramp up to be red. Okay, so no matter what we see here, we're always going to see yellow. We're always going to see that green material. If we take that value and we bring it up to 255, now we're going to see a very harsh transition between those two colors. So with that information, what I can do now is give myself the ability to Vertex Paint the contrast. So the way that I'm going to set this up is, instead of using an exponent that I want to be anywhere from 1 to 255, we can use the green channel for this. So I'm going to pull out the green channel. Now remember, the green channel is going to have a value of anywhere between 0 and 1. Okay, so I'm going to bring this out to a multiply. So the green channel, when I paint it, is going to be anywhere between 0 and 1. This is going to go into the exponent. What I want to do is I want to ramp that up so that the green channel, instead of just being multiplied by 1, gets multiplied by, let's say, 255. So now 0 times 255 will give us 0. 0.5 will give us 128, thereabouts. And 1 will give us 255. So we've ramped up that 0 to 1 to 0 to 255. Now the problem with this is that we don't actually want the 0. So after this gets multiplied, I'm just going to add 0.1 back in here. So now the smallest value we can get is 0.1, and the largest value is going to be 255.1. That should eliminate our 0 problem. This, of course, is all coming from the green channel. So if I go and save this, and we go back here, we're going to paint the green channel here in a second. What I'm going to do is I first want to make sure the red channel has some variation in it here. So this is all white. I'll paint in black, and I'll just go and give it some chunkiness here on the sides. Whoops. And maybe something like that. Then I'll switch to the green channel. And you can see that I can paint in the green channel back down to that softness. Now this is going mental here, and it's because I'm painting at a value of 1. But if I bring this down to a softer value and go zoom in here, you can see that I can soften that transition. And if I go and paint in white, whoops, we can harden that transition. So the green channel is giving us our contrast now, which is really, really nice. It gives us the ability to control just how hard this is. So again, I'm going to paint this whole thing in black, and we'll bring our value down to like 0.1. And now I have the ability to just soften that transition. Now I want to be careful just how hard I paint here, that I don't end up adding too much too quickly. Otherwise, you see it kind of jump to the next vertex. So something like that. And again, I can go back into the red channel, and I can add more with this. And again, you get that kind of jagged noise that really kind of breaks up your vertex colors. You're not getting just black or white on the vertices. Okay, so what if you want to use this again. We are looking at that transition in between those colors, right? So we've got kind of where the brick is going to go. We've got where the plaster is going to go. We want to have this middle ground here, the broken plaster. So let's go back into our material and let's do that again. So here is what's generating all of our feature set for that transition between brick, which we'll call red, and plaster, which we'll call green. And I want to actually, where the brick is, have myself, give myself the ability to paint in another value here. So let's go and give ourselves another color, blue, and this one will be the broken plaster. So if red is the brick and green is the plaster, giving myself another lerp between the green and the blue will now give me the ability to, wherever it's green, shift into some blue. To do this, I'm going to take all of my channel that exists and duplicate it. Pull this down. Pull this over. And we'll plug this into the alpha. Now, I don't want to be using the red and green channel here in this way because obviously they're in use already. So let's switch them out for the blue and the alpha. Also, since I have noise in each one of these layers, I can throw the green in here and the red in here, and now the noise will be different between those two areas. So let's go and save this. Let's take a look at how this works. So again, I'm going to go and paint bucket fill all of this thing. So let's start with the red channel. Let's start with black. Excuse me. And I'm going to go paint this whole thing in black. Obviously, there's some green channel in here too. Oh, let's ramp this up. Let's try that again. So there's the green channel. Let's go. Oh, that was red as well. Okay. Actually, I'm going to turn on blue and alpha here as well. And look at that. Okay. So there's our noise. It looks like one of the noises that I'm using has still got a little too much contrast in it. I can see some purple in here, which, you know, we're going to have to fix. So let's start with the red channel in white. And here, let's fill that in. There we go. We'll add some green channel here. So there, I'm putting a hole inside of the plaster. It looks like what I'm doing with my green channel is not working as well as I'd like it to. And so again, this is the exponent here that I'm doing, this little multiplication. So I think what I'll do is I'll put this back to be a scalar. Like so. And again, I'll go and set this back to be 20 for the... Actually, this one we're going to want a little softer. I'm going to bring this one to 10. And I'll create another exponent here. And I'll set this one to be 60. Like so. It doesn't look like that painting is working. I'm getting some of the math a little mixed up here. So we'll just use the exponent. And again, I'm going to go flood this whole thing with black. Just to get it to a default state. Okay. And we'll switch these off. Paint in white. And in the red channel, I should now be able to break my bricks like so. Okay, so there's where I want the bricks to be broken. If I go to the blue channel and I go and turn down my opacity here, I should be able to now, around the edge, give me the ability to bleed in some of that broken plaster. So I've actually given myself 2 levels of painting here. And it looks like I might have the exponents backwards. We're going to go tweak their values here to make sure that we're getting this look the way we want. So we want again, the red is going to be the plaster, the blue is the brick, and the green is the broken segments of that plaster. So let's start by I actually have a hard-coded value in here. There we go. So now you can see that broken plaster is softening. And exponent number 2, I'm going to bring this up and make it a little bit harder. So where the plaster breaks, we get a little bit better of a transition. Okay, so I'm pretty pleased with the way that's working now. I now have the ability to kind of paint in these 2 different regions here, giving myself the ability to break off where the plaster is, and then be able to show the brick underneath with the blue. And so I can paint some blue in here, or I can go in and soften that blue up a little bit and come back and make it follow just around the edges here. Something like that. Again, giving me the ability to, and again, I'm getting a little too much. I can see my vertices here, so I'm getting a little too much of that there, but it's now giving me that effect. Now, there's one more thing that we want to do, and that's to help make that plaster kind of sit in between the tiles of our brick. And so we're done with our colors. So what we want to do is now take these things. We're going to include this and this, and drop this down. You come to. And these guys are what we no longer need. So this guy is going to be the transition between plaster, and this one is the transition between brick. Maybe spell brick. There we go. Okay. So we now have our 2 lerps that are going to give us the ability to swap in between those 2 nodes, and so that's going to give us a lot of control here. Before we get any further, I'm going to bring in my textures. So I'm going to go down to the texture slot here, and again, I'm just going to use my wooden floor here, and I'll bring this in. Pop. Like so. And we can do this a couple of different ways. We can take the texture sample, which is, this one is the, whoops, come back here. That's the ARM, ambient occlusion, rough, and metallic. There's my diffuse. So let's start with the diffuse. And I'll show you a couple of different ways we can go about doing this. So way number 1 is just to simply, wherever you have a lerp, go and plug that in. So here's my alpha here. So the wood in this case is going to be the blue. So my RGB here replaces that one. Like so. I need to create a series of lerps for each of these things now. If I go and save this, instead of blue, we should see my floorboards. So I'm going to create another lerp, and this one will be for the normal. Now, as I don't actually have a normal color for anything else, we're just going to blend a flat normal, which, handy, I have my blue, and the normal map for the wood in here. And again, if I go and find the alpha that is controlling this, that's this one, I can plug this in here. And now I'm getting the same transition in the normal. And we'll do the same thing again. One more lerp. One more texture. Let's move this back. So here is my ambient occlusion, roughness, and metal. We're going to lerp those together, and then I got to break these again into my 4 components. Actually, I only need 3. We don't need the other one. And I'm just going to use a value of 1 here, excuse me, for the B value. And again, our same linear interpolate value, and we have ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic. Okay, so let's save this. And check out how we're doing on our board here. So we should now see, instead of where the blue was, we should see the wood up here. There we go. So we're now seeing that wood appear. The red is showing us where the plaster would be, and the green is showing us where the chipped version of the plaster would be. So you can see a couple of areas here where I can see the wood not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so I just want to ensure that I actually have Vertex Painting in those areas. So I believe that's the green channel. Paint this at 1. It is not the green. It was the blue. Trying to remember where I put what. There. So we're going to need to make sure when we do this that that broken plaster ends up painting in the right area. And that you don't leave any of it uncovered, because it looks like that breaks it. But there, we're now getting our wood to appear where it's supposed to with the plaster on top. Now again, let's do something about the transition between the broken plaster and the wood beams. And this is where the height map is going to come into play. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the end result of our blend. Let's go and take these guys, move them up here. That's why this is wrong. This should be plaster, and this should be this guy. I set this up incorrectly. That's why it was looking so funny. So all of those lerps need to come from this node. Like so. Let's take a look at what this does here. There we go. So there's the brokenness. It looks like I've got my instances backwards here too, in terms of their values. And so I'm just going to go and invert those values. So that we end up getting the softer transition on the wood side and the harsher transition on the red side. Okay. So here's what we're going to do now. We're going to take our height map. And we're going to subtract it from our mask. rearrange these here like this. Now I'm only using the red channel from the height map. We don't need to go crazy with RGB here because we're only using a black and white value in what we're doing with everything else. And so we're going to subtract this. Now I should technically be doing this before the clamp so that our values don't drop down below 0, which tends to mess with a linear interpolation. But what we should be seeing now, where we get our transition, yeah, and again, so this purple you're seeing, that is the brokenness of it going below. So let's go and put that in the right order. So I'm going to break the clamp off. And this is going to go in here. And we'll rearrange this. Control and drag it in here. And put that in there. So yeah, if you go above 1 or below 0 in a lerp, it tends to act a little buggy. So we'll save this material out. We'll bounce back in to the viewport here and take a look at what this is doing. And we should see something that looks a little bit nicer in terms of these colors now. Okay, so they are behaving the way that I want them to. However, the only spot that we're really seeing this is right here, where you can see that green starting to bleed into the wood tiles. Let's see if I see this anywhere else. I don't really see it. Oh, there's a little bit there too. So let's go and see if we can Vertex paint some of this in to happen. So again, this should be on the blue channel here, and I'm going to bring my opacity way down. And I need to be doing this on the red channel. And there you can see, as I go and paint this now, we're going to get the plaster start to find its way in between the pieces of my brick, or in this case, my wood. And so if I go and soften this, let's bring our radius down even further here. If I go and soften this again, just around the perimeter a little bit here. I should be able to now start getting that to start bleeding in between those tiles. And again, something a little bit like that. I'm going to go into the blue channel here and see if I can't. Oh, we got to paint in the opposite color. We'll pull some of that plaster back out. I might go and soften that transition a little bit. That 125 seems a little harsh. Maybe down to 80. Just to give us a little bit more out of it. And there, something like that, I think is going to work just nicely. So that's decent. I've got it going in between my slots of wood here. So I'll get little bits of plaster kind of in between those areas. And I'm now blending in between my two nodes here. Now let's take a look at making this material a little bit more user-friendly, as right now it is very much not. This becomes a logistical nightmare to have to try and clean up. And so let's go take a look at cleaning this up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new material function. Okay, and I'll call this wooden floor, and I'll give it a prefix here for being able to identify it as MF. So material function wooden floor. Inside of this, we're going to make material attributes, and I'm going to plug my attributes into the output, like so. Now, since this is my wooden floor, I'm going to go and grab my wooden floor textures. Wooden floor, wooden floor, wooden floor, wooden floor. And we're going to go and drag them into the wooden floor here. We're going to go plug them in the right place. So this is the ARM map here. So ambient occlusion, roughness, metallic, this is my diffuse, my base color. That's my height. And my normal. Excuse me. So my normal. And I'm going to put the height map in something that I know I'm not going to need for anything else. Just so that I can go and grab it when I need it. So if I go and look at all of these other things that I have here, we can use custom UVs here for this. And so we'll use the red channel, put that in the custom UVs. So I'll save this guy. We can close the wooden floor material function. The next thing I'm going to need to do is create another material function for the plaster and one for the broken plaster. So to do this, let's see, I'm going to my substance designer here. Here's my wooden floor that I've made. Let's go see if I have anything that can be used as a plaster node. So we're going to go File, New Substance. We'll call this Plaster. We're going to make it 2K. And okay. And I'm going to do, I don't want to spend forever here inside of Designer. So we'll kind of do a really, really quick pass on this. So I'm going to go to Library and look for Plaster. Look for noise. One of these guys in here, we've got some, as I recall, one of these things looks a lot like plaster. That's not bad. Okay, so I'm going to use that for my plaster. We'll make it a normal map and plug it in. Go take a look at what it looks like. I want to make sure that wherever it's black here, I don't want anything glossy, smooth. And so maybe what I'll do is I'll go through the, on the grunge map here, we'll change the random seed a little bit. That's a little bit better. And then I might even just blur it a little bit. So let's do a high quality grayscale blur in here. And just amp up the quality and pull the intensity down a little bit. I just don't want it to be super noisy. Okay, plaster. Let's see. Let's grab a gradient. I think it's this one I want. And we'll use the grunge map here as the input for the gradient. That's not the right gradient. This is the right gradient. Delete this guy. And I'm going to go pick some gradient colors here. So I'm going to go into the gradient editor. And I'm just going to make something kind of plaster in color. So maybe what I'll do is let's bring the browser back over here. Not 100% sure I'm going to be able to eyedropper from outside of this, but we'll give it a whirl. So we'll just go and grab, let's see, there's some plaster color right there. I'll close that. And voila. We got plaster. Plug this in here. Let's go and check out the fruits of our labor here. Okay, not bad. We need some roughness. Plaster should be plenty rough. So we'll grab some levels. We'll grab our blurred version. Actually, probably should put the blurred version in here. We'll grab the blurred version. And we'll go and adjust the levels for the roughness. So, in terms of how rough things should be, I don't want it to be, well, actually quite rough. We don't want it to ever get shiny, though, so I'm going to start pulling away some of the higher values. It's not too bad. I'll grab an ambient occlusion, which, put this here. We'll use the height map. I need an ambient occlusion node, so we'll go out and output. AO. Copy, paste, 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 add ambient occlusion. And now we have ambient occlusion as an output. The metallic value can be black. Plaster is not metal. And then the height map we'll grab from here. Okay. So again, not the greatest looking plaster in the world, but, you know, close enough. The nice thing here is that we can go and play with this random seed here all we want to give us different takes on the plaster in terms of what we're seeing noise-wise. Again, I want to avoid anything where that balance gets blown out, and so keep it at 0.5. Keep the contrast at 0.5. And just playing around with this random seed here will give us different passes on this, different takes on this. But anyway, something like that. So we'll go back to the Explorer, and we're going to go and export these out as bitmaps. Let's see. I'll go choose where I want these things to go, which is going to be desktop, Turner made, textures, and AO, yes. Base color, normal, rough, metallic, and height, yes. Export. The other thing that I need while doing this is the broken plaster. The broken plaster, I'm going to try and use the same node here. In fact, I'm going to use the entire same setup that I have. It's just going to be replacing the grunge map here. So if I go to my library and let's kill this and just type in noise, I'm going to go and blend a few noises together. So clouds 3, B and white spots 2. We'll blend these together using an overlay. That's not too bad. And what I want to do is then just replace this. And each one of these guys. No, that was wrong. Let me undo that. Just replace it in here. Okay, and then the next thing I want to do is go into the gradient map here, and I'm going to pitch down the whiter values. To try and give me something a little bit noisier. And I'm going to grab the normal, and I'm going to bring the intensity up a lot more. That's probably overkill. Okay, that's better. I'm going to go in here, and let's grab this node and darken it, and this node and darken it. We'll darken these guys here as well. Starting to get there. There's still a little bit of whiteness in here. But I'd like to be able to just kill a little bit more. There we go. And voila, broken plaster. Again, very, very quick pass on here. I'd obviously spend a lot more time on this if it were for production. Let me go into my folder and go and adjust the textures that we just made. I don't want to export here right away because if I do, I will overwrite the ones that I've already made. And so let's go and take a look at our plaster nodes. I'm going to need some Photoshop here. I'm going to assemble these in the correct method. So the base color is fine. The AO I need. The height is fine. The metallic I might as well grab. And the roughness. So I'm going to bring these in here. Pop, pop, pop. And we'll close our noise. And we can close the metallic. It's not doing anything anyway. So here's the AO. I'm going to go to image mode. And we'll set this to be RGB. I'm going to copy the roughness. And that's going to go AO, rough, and metallic. And I now have my ARM map, which I'm going to save as plaster ARM. Okay, so those guys are good to go. In Designer, I'm going to go rename this thing. And we'll call it shipped. And we'll export these. They should go exactly where they were before. I'm going to skip the metallic map this time here. We're not using it for anything. And again, I'm going to go to Photoshop and close this guy. We'll go grab the chip plaster AO, the chip plaster roughness, bring those in here. And again, I'm just going to merge them in the same way. So here's the roughness. We're going to do this with the AO. Image mode RGB. We'll copy the roughness. Place it in the AR. And fill the M. And save that as chip plaster ARM. Okay, there. We've got two sets of textures now that we can use with this to try and make it look a little bit better. I probably should have done this before recording the video, but I thought I might have just stopped at the material creation. But now that I'm taking this into another level here, I wanted to clean up as much as I can. Okay, back in here, we're going to go to our texture slot, and we're going to import the textures that we need. So these are going to be chipped plaster arm color and normal. I don't need the height for anything here. We're going to need the plaster arm color normal. And we'll bring these in here. Now I could set this up with the same subtractive node so that the textures work in exactly the same way. Did those come in? They did come in. And I've got a few things that I need to correct in my textures here that are acting. This is going to break my materials from the onset, but it'll be important. Okay, so everything came in. So I'm going to start with the ARMs and make sure that the sRGB is turned off on those, which it was on that one. UV distortion, that's something else. Chipped, plaster. Yeah, they're good. Okay, they're all good to go. These guys were brought in as normal maps, so they should be good to go. So what we can do now is create in the materials section some more material functions. So we're going to create a material function again. We're going to call this MF underscore chipped plaster. I'll go in here. I'll go into my textures. We're going to grab chip, 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 and bring these into the chip plaster material function. Pull them back over here. We are going to create a make material attributes node to go into the output. We are going to grab the RGB for the normal the ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic values from this guy, and our base color from here. We'll save this. We'll close that. We're going to go create another material function called plaster. So materials, material function, mf underscore plaster. And in here, we're going to make material attributes again. We're going to go and pull in our plaster textures. So here I've got plaster, plaster, plaster. Bring this all in here. And again, try and plug them in the right spots. So this is the normal, RGB, ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic values, which we'll save. We can actually add a little bit more customization to these nodes as well to really push them even further. And we'll go to our materials again, and there we have. Okay, chip plaster, plaster, wooden floor. So now what we want to do is we want to go into the material, and we want to set this material up to work in essentially the exact same way that we've got it set. But instead of using all the nonsense that we have here, we want to start pulling nodes out from the material functions. So I'm going to right click. Let's make a material and function. So we're going to call a material. This material is the wooden floor. That's the one that I had selected when I made the material function. So here's the wooden floor. What we're going to do now is we're going to go and blend this using a lerp. Or just lerp. Although I don't think I can do this. I think I need to do a material blend. I think it's blend material attributes. This acts just like a lerp does. We're going to duplicate this guy. And now instead of floor, we're going to go find MF plaster. And we're going to blend the wooden floor with the plaster. In fact, if I take this guy and duplicate him, we can blend the plaster with the chipped plaster. And now, all we need to do is take our nodes that we've made here and plug them into the right places. Now, one of the things that we could do would be to take this guy, duplicate him back here, break the material attributes. Once we have the broken material attributes, if we go take a look at where we put the height map, we can go and pull that out so that we can put it into where the height map is here. But I think I'm just going to leave the height map in here as its own texture, like so. Okay, so we're going to do that. So, first things first, this is the difference between plaster and chipped plaster. So I'm going to grab all these nodes. We'll bring them up here. And that's the alpha between plaster and chipped plaster. The alpha for the brick transparency is just this guy. And so I'll take this up here. And wire it in directly. And we can now go and kill everything else that's here. Now, in order to get out of the blended material attributes, we're just going to go and break them. And just wire them in accordingly. Not using opacity anywhere, so that's fine. I'm not actually using a world position offset anywhere, so that's fine. And I'm not using a pixel depth offset. The only other thing I would do here to clean this up even further is convert the height map to a parameter, which I would call height map. And save this. There is one more level of optimization that we could do here that would clean this up even further. And that would be to create a material function out of our Vertex Paint, our noise nodes, and all of the math that we're doing here. So since this math is the same, everything up to the power is the same in both of these nodes. And again, I'm using the same, well, almost using the same. I'm using two different vertex colors. I can use an input for that. What I could do is I could copy that, and we could go make a material function out of this. And so this would speed things up a little bit even further. If I go create another material function, and this is going to be mf underscore, and this is our vert paint material function, and I go and edit this, we're going to paste these guys in. The output is going to go here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an input for the material function, which is going to be a vector 4, and we're going to break that like so. And then this is where we can sub out the color that we're using here. In fact, if I don't do it this way, let's delete that. Let's just change this guy to a scalar. And we'll pull the red channel from here in here. And what I can do now is I can go and name this Vert Paint or Vert Color. Okay, we'll save this. And that should really give me again, inside of the material, a lot more cleanliness here. So if I take the vert color back, I can now delete all of this. And I can right click function, do a material function call, and here's our vert paint. So in this one, we were using the red channel, and then this just goes in here. And again, to show you how much cleaner that makes things, there's the green channel, or the blue channel rather. I'm going to remove that and all of this. Which I'll delete. Recreate, and this was the blue channel. And I can plug this into the clamp. Now, that has broken my exponent here in terms of the value here. So we should also create another input, which we can call exponent, and wire that into the exponent, deleting this. Saving this. And now, pull my height map down here. Now I've got an exponent value. In fact, I don't like the placement of these things. We're going to go and sort priority 0, sort priority 1. Save that. That's just going to alter where the nodes are. So there. So there's my vertex color. I now have the exponent, which again I'll create as a scalar, which we'll call exponent. Like so. And exponent 2. In here. And again, I can now go and clean these things up a little bit. I'll put this one here. Give these a default value. This was 20, and this one was 80, I think. Now we can kill our function here. We don't need this anymore. And this should have all exactly the same functionality it had just a moment ago, but now using material functions to do this. So if I close that guy, go back to our world here, presumably we should just see this pop into life if everything has worked out according to plan. If not, we'll do some troubleshooting. There we go. And so there, so I now have my plaster. I have my broken rough plaster, which again, these materials suck. But you can kind of see what they're doing. And I'm now getting the transition in between. So it looks like I've skewed my transitions here. If I go to my instance, that's not the instance. I'll close that guy too. Somewhere here, there's my instance. We can go play around with those numbers to get them the values back the way they should have been. So 20, 5. Ooh, there we go. And then this one, harder. Which will give me that broken plaster. And so there is now a texture here that will, again, you know, allow me to go in and paint some plaster here in these areas. If I get the colors right. Again, I'm painting at a really low value here. Swap over into the blue channel. This should be black here. And add the plaster to it. And again, this should give me the ability to have that plaster going in between the bricks, or in this case, the wooden slats. Something like so. Now, an additional thing that you could do here would be to create a normal map for these things that allows them to get separated from one another. Again, in terms of that normal, they're going to be pretty flush with each other. And so all kinds of things you could do to push this up. You could use a material offset, vertex offset in your material. If I were going to this material here, in terms of the where are you now? World position offset. So we could do that in each one of the functions in order to make sure that they kind of read the right way. So the Vertex Paint, there's the wooden floor. So leave the wooden floor where it is. The plaster, we can do that here. So here's our plaster material. And what I could do is get a vertex normal in world space and multiply that by an offset value. Offset typing. And put that in here. So we're just going to multiply those together. So it moves out in the right direction. And we can put this into the world position offset. And which one is this? Plaster or broken plaster? This is the plaster. So let's give this a default value of 2. Which is probably going to be way too much. What we can do is we can actually even go and plug in the, because this is a function, we can plug in the blue channel of the Vertex Paint in here to go and paint just how much that is raised up. But if we do that and we go and do the function of the broken plaster as well and do the same thing. So again, vertex, normal in world space, multiplied by a scalar, vert offset, and just set this one to 1 by default, or maybe even 0.5 by default. Plug this in here, and plug this into the world position offset, if it's even necessary. And what that should do is it should start raising the plaster off this thing. Now, I think 1's going to be a little bit of an overkill here, but you'll see the kind of end result once this loads. If it loads. We're just going to wait for the shaders to compile. And this should give us something pretty decent in terms of the materials. Apparently we're compiling negative shaders now. Come on now, let's see what you got. Don't close these. Minus 100 shaders. Okay, there we go. So if we go look at this from the ground here now, you should see the plaster being raised up a little bit. Now this is only moving vertices, and so obviously the denser your mesh here, the better that's going to look. I also have a very bad set of tiling on the plaster and the plaster noise here. So again, this is something that could be tweaked inside of my material functions. Really quite simply, if I were to go into the, let's start with the chip plaster. And all I'm going to do here, I have my 3 nodes. I'm just going to create a texture coordinate node and multiply that. Put this into each of the UVs. And create an input. And that input is going to be a scalar called scale. Scale, which I'll put into B. And I'm going to give this thing a default value of 1 just to make sure it doesn't break anything. And we can save that. And in fact, to speed up my life here, I'm going to just go and copy this. Come on, you. Copy. And we can do this inside of the other materials as well. So here's the plaster. Paste here. UV, UV, and UV. So we'll save this. This is going to break things here in the interim. But if I go back into our Vertex Painting material, that's the wrong one. The material. Again, it's got inputs that it's looking for now in each of these nodes. And so I can go and grab a scalar here. And this is going to be plaster scale. We'll put this in here. We'll give it a default value of 1 so it doesn't break anything. And we'll duplicate it. And I'll put this in here, again, with a default value of 1. And we'll just name it chipped plaster scale. And save that. Again, I could do this with the wooden floor here as well. To make sure that I have the ability of tiling that material. And what we should end up with here is something pretty robust that looks pretty good. I'm going to close this up. I'm not going to paint anymore, so I'm going to get out of the painting node. And we'll go and adjust our material instance, which has now got all of those instanced values here. So the chip plaster and the offset, the plaster scale and the vert offset, which again, because they were all made to be scalars, I have control over them all here. So the offset at 2 was a little much. I'll bring this down to 1. 0.5 is good there. The chip plaster scale, I'll bring this up. I'm going to set it to maybe be 5. We can go take a look at what that looks like. Yeah, that's starting to look a little bit more like the image of what chip plaster was supposed to look like, which is decent. And I'm also going to the plaster scale. We'll set it to 5 as well, just so that we're starting to get a little bit more of that effect. Not too bad. I could probably even go and push that even further if I take these 5s, double them. There. We'll start getting something that looks a little bit better in terms of the overall look of this. And again, you know, when you get up close to this thing, it's going in between, well, in my case, the wooden planks, but you know, on bricks, it would go in between the bricks here. And give you that really, really neat effect. The only other thing that would make this look even better would be to just really push that edge a little bit further, so that it's not. And again, I didn't pay too much attention to what the colors of this thing look like in its in terms of what it's, you know, actually looking like here. You know, I didn't go and push this as far as I could have. It doesn't have any height in the plaster, which again is something that, you know, might look a little bit better if you were to do that. And how tiled you make that noise as well. So I'm getting really clean edge on my plaster here. You can see there, but I can go into the materials and tile that noise texture I'm using as well, which would also give us the kind of effect that we, you know, are looking for. The other really nice thing about this is that, you know, if there were 2 of these things side by side, and I were to go in and paint this one, let's go to the red channel here, and do that, and go and paint in white here. We could, oh, come on now. Again, I'm only painting at 07 here, but going in and doing this, there we go, and we'll fill that all the way in, and then we'll go to the blue channel, and we'll swap colors, I think. Yeah, it looks like I should switch the colors on the chipping versus the not chipping, to put them in the right place. But you can see now how you can get, you know, going across 2 meshes, you know, this kind of effect here where you don't really notice that there's 2 meshes. The error that you're seeing here, this little shadow that's being caused by the light maps and the fact that this isn't baked. If I go and do my lighting here, build my lighting, that should completely disappear. And we should get what looks like a absolutely seamless version of this little effect. And so there you have it, kind of start to finish, a procedural kind of way of setting up a chipped wall, you know, a kind of very dynamic looking material that if you're doing a world in which you have a lot of repetition in textures, you know, you can use this as a means of breaking that up so you don't get you know, the same kind of cloning and patterns repeating. You know, while I didn't paint both of these things at the top here, you can see how problematic that is, that same shape repeats every couple of units. And so, you know, having the ability to go in and Vertex paint these things to break it up so you don't end up with that tiling in that way is very, very powerful, and will give you the kind of effect here that, you know, that looks really, really good in terms of what you see. And so even by just going and adding this in here, you can see that I've broken up the tiling between those 2 sections. And so I'll let the light finish baking here so we can lose that shadow in between these two things. Again, UV-wise, I didn't do anything on these meshes because it was just a plane that was created inside of 3ds Max and brought here into the engine. That plane is unwrapped 0 to 1, and so it has the UVs kind of that it needs, and I didn't have to do any extra work on it. But you can kind of see how this would work on multiple meshes. You know, if you had a hallway or some city walls or something that were meant to look chaotic and broken in this way, this would be a really good way of kind of breaking that up and giving you this kind of effect. And so yeah, again, I'll wait out the lighting here until we get something that that looks complete, and then we'll kind of end it there. In terms of performance and whatnot, you know, this is not all that heavy. You know, using material functions is a really good way of being able to reuse the same mathematical calculation without it taking too much of a toll on the performance. Using a material functions in your texture too, really good way of being able to go in and kind of add some you know, more dynamic effects to your materials, and having them, you know, look really nice without, you know, too much effort. Again, the textures that I made here were the wooden one I'd spent a little bit more time on from a previous project, but everything else beyond that was just done in a matter of minutes here, and so that's why you know, this doesn't look as good as it should, but you kind of get the gist in terms of what this does for a project. Now, if you've been watching, I want to thank you for checking this out. You know, maybe think about subscribing to my YouTube channel if you like this sort of thing and are interested in game development for Unreal and, you know, the things that kind of come with that. I do requests all the time. You're free to send me an email or comment in the video, and let me know if there's something, you know, tech-wise or art-wise that you're trying to accomplish in the engine that you don't know how to do. I can usually put together something pretty quick in order to try and help those out who are a little behind in their knowledge of Unreal and the processes that we use to do this kind of thing. And so feel free to leave a comment if there's something that you're trying to figure out how to do and you can't go about doing it. It's probably something that in the past I've attempted to do and have probably taken a stab at once or twice, and so I'm probably able to give you a hand with that. So feel free to subscribe and comment on this video, and until next time, I want to thank you for watching. It's really awkward. I was hoping that I would be able to finish that little bit of dialogue as this finished building. Apparently not the case. All right. So I paused the video here while this finished building, just to speed it up a little bit. And you can see here, very clear that a transition works really nicely between these two meshes. The only place where there is any real big issue is when you get into this area here. This is the vertex offset, right? So I'm raising the vertices where the plaster is. So anywhere where there's plaster, those vertices are getting raised up. And you can see that that is causing some issue. And so you just want to make sure when you get a transition like that, And again, this is, you can see that it actually works really nicely at the bottom here. When you get an issue like that, you just need to make sure that when you paint these areas that you are painting them in a way that does not interfere with that. So if I were to go in here and paint this again, let me go into the red channel and eat some of this away. And then switch over to white and kind of build this back up again. Pull some of that strength up. And then some of the blue. Let's invert that. We should be able to. I don't know why this is not painting now. That removes it. White. There we go. And then we can go to the blue and chip this away a little bit. And so there, when that actually seamlessly goes across there, we shouldn't actually get any break in the material now. And so the vertices that are being raised in the same two boards in the same place. And so there is now, two of these things side by side with different levels of painting on these things that, helps to make them look quite a bit different than one another, giving you this kind of really neat ability here to dynamically affect what these things look like. And so there, two completely different paint jobs across identical meshes. That, again, very, very hard to see that transition. And so there you have it. There is the entire Vertex painting workflow that I use. Again, the robustness here is that inside of that Vertex material, if you want to use this for something that is not going to be, plaster, chipped plaster, and wood, then cool. If you want to do asphalt with puddles in it, then cool. Plug the asphalt in here and plug your puddles directly into B. I'm only using the red channel to blend those two together with the height map. So your asphalt height map would go in here. It gives you the ability to use this Vertex painting material amongst many different maps. So putting snow on top of things, putting moss on rocks or trees, putting puddles on the ground, putting plaster on brick or wooden slats like this. This material's got a lot of robustness to it that can be used for just about anything. And so, again, I thank you for watching. I thank you for paying attention to this channel. Subscribe if you like what you see, and we'll continue to try making videos for you right here. Thanks again. Take care.